So, you and your animal family members are moving to Oahu. Welcome. If you're looking for some information to get started with the process of preparing your animal family members for travel to the island, keep watching. I'll show you where to find the complete guide and checklist from the Department of Agriculture, and we'll go over some of the health requirements that your dog or cat will need in preparation for moving here to the island. Your first step to get your cat or dog prepared to move to the island of Oahu is to do a little research. I'll show you how to locate Department of Agriculture's Checklist 1, which is a complete guide and checklist of the requirements that your dog or cat will need before coming to the island. And by meeting all these requirements, you'll be able to pick up your dog or cat when you land in Honolulu, and they won't have to spend an extended amount of time in the quarantine station. In the rest of this video, I'll give a general overview of the health requirements that you'll want to complete at the vet before you move here, just because reading through the checklist can be a little bit confusing and tedious. But please do refer to Checklist 1 as your most accurate and reliable source for preparing your dog or cat, because it's possible that this checklist could be updated between the time you're watching this video and the time that you actually prepare, and because there's going to be more required of you as far as submitting paperwork and other things outside of what. To locate the complete checklist and guide for moving from the mainland or the continental United States to the state of Hawaii, Oahu in particular, Google search Department of Agriculture Checklist 1. Likely it's going to be the first thing that pops up. When you click on it, it'll open this PDF. The top page will outline which checklist is appropriate for you to use, depending on where you're coming from and where you're going to. Since we're coming from the continental United States and flying to the state of Hawaii, particularly the island of Oahu, we're going to use Checklist 1. The rest of the guide is a step-by-step list of the different requirements that you'll need to complete for your animal family member to be released the same day after you land in Oahu. This flowchart is meant to demonstrate in a bit more visual way the health requirements that you'll want to take care of at the vet before you move to Oahu. And these are all listed on Checklist 1 as well. Thankfully, because you're coming from the mainland, where rabies vaccination is required currently in every state, it's likely that your animal family member will be starting closer to the middle of this flowchart rather than at the very beginning. So let's break down each section just a little bit and what they mean. The first step is to ensure that your animal family member's microchip is working and can be read. You can do this anytime at your local veterinary clinic. They have the capability to read your animal family member's microchip using a scanner. A microchip is a small device that exists under your dog or cat's skin, usually in the shoulder blade area, and it holds a 15-digit number. And this number is unique to your animal family member. It's like their ID, and it's the only way for them to be identified as an individual. This is an important first step because the microchip number will need to be listed on the rabies vaccination certificates that you have and on the FAVN titer. And that will be your proof to the Department of Agriculture that the paperwork you submit belongs with your animal family member. For the rabies vaccination, as I mentioned before, it's very likely that your animal family member is up to date on the rabies vaccination. So if you have an adult dog or cat, very likely you may be able to skip these steps. You will want to verify with your local veterinary clinic that your dog or cat most recent rabies vaccination is up to date and won't expire before or during the time that you travel to Oahu. If it turns out that's the case, you'll want to update the rabies vaccine as soon as possible because the amount of time prior to arrival on island will be important. Part of the rabies vaccination requirements shown on the checklist are that your dog or cat needs to have had 2 rabies vaccinations within their lifetime, and the rabies vaccinations can't have been administered less than 30 apart. If you've got an animal family member that's a little bit younger, maybe less than a year old, this is where you'll want to pay extra attention and ensure that you get that first rabies vaccination scheduled, get their second rabies vaccination scheduled 30 days from that date, and then 30 days following the second rabies vaccine, there will be a FAVN blood draw. For those of us who have adult animal family members, and we know that they've had more than one rabies vaccination in their lifetime, the other piece of this is having the paperwork to prove that that's the case. To get prepared, you'll want to look in your dog or cat's veterinary file if you have one on hand at home, or ask your local veterinary clinic if they can print you original copies of the rabies certificates. Every time that your dog or cat gets a rabies vaccine, the doctor signs a rabies certificate as proof that they've been vaccinated. The checklist requires original copies, so wet signature in blue ink. If you don't have those copies on hand, just ask your veterinary clinic to print you new ones and specify that they've got to be original, signed in ink, and it'll be one certificate for each vaccination. If that's not going to be possible, or it's going to be challenging, no harm in just updating the rabies vaccination anyways, so that you can have that paperwork, as long as the timing between the two is correct. Once you've got both rabies vaccinations up to date, you've got an original rabies certificate for each vaccination, you'll want to wait at least 30 days. That's the amount of time for your dog or cat's body to produce an adequate number of antibodies that protects them from rabies. The reason that 30 days plus window is important is because when we move on to the FAVN blood draw, FAVN is short for fluorescent antibody virus neutralization, which is a test that measures and screens for an adequate amount of antibodies. At your dog or cat's FAVN blood draw point, the doctor or technicians will take a blood sample from your animal family member, package it up, and they'll be submitting it to one of the approved labs, which is outlined on the checklist. Most commonly, that's Kansas State University Rabies Lab, and they'll run the test there at that lab. Results typically take about 4 to 6 weeks to process, and do note, following the day that the approved lab receives the sample, there has to be a 30-day waiting period. So you'll want to ensure that this sample gets drawn up and processed more than 30 days. Remember that the sample is going to be mailed likely overnight and has to stay cold, so they may not send it out exactly the same day or next day. So do give yourself plenty of wiggle room when you make this appointment. Once the lab has processed the test and they have results, they'll send an official original copy of the results directly to the Department of Agriculture in Honolulu. And they'll typically email a copy of the results to your veterinary clinic. Be sure to ask your veterinary clinic for a copy of those results for your personal file and as part of the package that you submit to Department of Agriculture. Once you've got a copy of those results, you'll want to review the copy and check the date that the sample was received by the lab, because the date that you arrive on island can't be sooner than 30 days from then if you're wanting to pick up your animal family member the same day. So make sure to schedule your flight in accordance to that waiting period. Once you've scheduled your flight, you're able to book your health certificate with your local veterinary clinic. A health certificate is a document that proves to the airline and to the state that a doctor has done an exam on your cat or dog and has found them to be free of contagious disease. Generally, this appointment occurs within 10 days of your flight, but you will want to check the requirements of your airline on their website because the window can vary a bit depending on the airline. At Pilina Vet, we generally advise our clients to schedule their health certificate about 7 days prior to their travel. 7 days is plenty of time to prepare. It's not cutting it too close, but there's still a bit of wiggle room if things change with your flight and it becomes delayed. It allows your health certificate to remain valid if there's a delay in your flight. As mentioned before, this is just a visualization of the health requirements that you'll want to complete at your local veterinary clinic. Be sure to provide a copy of checklist 1 to your local veterinary clinic so they can ensure they're following directions appropriately as well. And then the checklist will also outline submission of all of the documentation that goes along with these health requirements and submission to the Department of Agriculture. Once you make it here to Oahu, we'd love to see you.